First up here in New here at 6, today a mayoral candidate's future in the November election is no longer in question after a judge passes a judgment in a suit challenging them. Now, the town of Ball's alderman Marc Mercer is currently a mayoral candidate for the town, vying for the seat in a matchup against incumbent Gail Wilking. He qualified for the November election last week, but just yesterday he was served a lawsuit by a self-proclaimed Ball resident who, while representing himself, accused Mercer of falsely reporting on his electoral records that he owed fines to the Board of Ethics. That resident, Charles Seaman, pointed to records from the Board of Ethics that he says substantiated that he did in fact owe fees and fines related to his previous electoral campaigns. But in a trial hearing just hours ago, a judge ruled the plaintiff lacked no real evidence since those records that he cited were never certified by the board itself, and threw out that case entirely.
What happened here today was a gentleman, on behalf of someone, introduced a lot of hearsay. The judge threw it out, and hopefully now we're on to the actual election. And I don't have nothing to hide from nobody, you know. I think this is kind of crazy to be going to court just because I wanted to help my town, but under the circumstances, I understand it. I would want Marc Mercer on the stand too if I was on the other side.
And our independent review of the Board of Ethics records show Mercer owes approximately $2,975 in fees going as far back as 2019. But if those fines would jeopardize his run for mayor remains in question, as Seaman says he does not plan to revive the lawsuit and has since reported the suit to the Attorney General and Board of Ethics for further review.